Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, for our friends in Geneva, Rodin, for our colleagues and friends in CIS. This is Alexander Hejazi. I'm glad to start this session in collaboration with UNECE. I am at University of Geneva, and it is a great pleasure to collaborate with UNECE on this very important element that is the kickstarting of Recovery Action Plan. This is an ongoing endeavor and collaboration with UNECE, and UNECE has been very active in setting up the framework. This workshop is going to be followed by an online platform, and you'll be receiving the URL with all the material that will be feeding this platform. The initial point and the most important focus of this endeavor is kickstarting Recovery Action Plan and having it up and running as soon as possible with two major components. The first one is integration. And I'll pass on the floor to my colleagues, Matteo Tarantino, who will detail out the agenda. And the second part of today's workshop is on localization, and we'll hear from different point of view and cases that will be exposed to us, as Matteo will be detailing very shortly. Just one logistical issue. I was asked to repeat the following elements that are very important. First of all, please notice that you'll be recorded. This event is important for your use later on. And also, please type your questions and remarks in the chat box that you have if you would like to participate in the Q&A. Thank you very much. And without further ado, I pass on the floor to my colleague, Matteo Tarantino.
Thank you, Alexander. My role today will be that of moderator. I will very briefly explain the agenda of today, and then we will move straight to the presentation. So after an opening and introduction by Ms. Gulnara Roll, the Secretary of the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management of UNECE, we will get right to the Recovery Action Plan. We have the great honor of having all three key authors of the Recovery Action Plan telling us different dimensions of integration that are needed to get the Recovery Action Plan up and running as soon as possible. The first will be Steven Nystrom, principal of New Stream Companies and former FIG Commission 9 chair, who is going to tell us, to give us a broad framework about the Recovery Action Plan and its integration, what cross-cutting teams are there. Then we will move to Professor Chrissy Potsiou, Professor of Cadastral and Land Management at the National Technical University of Athens and Honorary President of FIG, and former Vice Chair of WPLA, who is going to explain to us another dimension of integration, that is how the Recovery Action Plan integrates with the guidelines for formalization of informal construction, which are another part of the same effort that can be found in the same online repositories as the Recovery Action Plan. And this will be followed by Rick Wouters, who is the Director of UREG Advice and former Vice Chair of WPLA, who is going to focus on yet a third dimension of integration, which is absolutely key, which is how to integrate land registration and cadastre in the Recovery Action Plan. Then we will have a brief Q&A. I shall remind you to use the Q&A function of Zoom or type your questions and remarks in the chat so that we can pick them up and then present them to our presenters in this Q&A. Then we will take a 10 minutes break, and then we will delve into the localities. So we will have Mrs. Aygul Kochorbeva, who is head of the Planning and Economic Department of the Mayoral Office of Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, who is going to tell us about the experience, the very rich experience of the city of Bishkek regarding informal settlements. And this will be followed by Ms. Tanya Arzumanian, who is head of the Urban Development Committee in Armenia, who is going to bring in another very important dimension of local experiences, which is how to address the challenges of informal settlements in zones which were also stricken by disaster. In this case, by the Spittak earthquake in Armenia. This will be followed by a final round of Q&A. The same rules apply. So from the audience and other panelists, we recommend typing your questions in the Q&A and in the chat, and then the workshop will close. So with all of this having been said and having explained the structure of this very exciting workshop, I give the floor without further ado to Gulnara Rol, Secretary of the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management of UNECE. Thank you, Gulnara. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Matteo. So I will then speak, we'll go into Russian language. Уважаемые коллеги, друзья, очень рада.
Dear colleagues and friends, it's a great pleasure for me to see you all. It's a very important moment for us. We are starting discussing the Recovery Action Plan. The Recovery Action Plan for post-COVID-19 situation and the informal settlements of the UNECE region. For many years within our committee, this issue of informal questions has been, it is discussed on an annual basis at our committee sessions. We have prepared a number of publications, and our working group deals with this issue on a regular basis. Unfortunately, I should say that before the pandemic, it was very difficult to start a specific work on improving the informal settlements. To some extent, this pandemic made it clearer for us that the problem of informal settlements is huge, and there are huge numbers of people who suffer from limited access to water, to standards of living, good standards of living. And sometimes, you know, the people live in houses without the address, without numbers and streets. And this is not an issue limited to CIS countries, of course. So we have prepared a number of examples how the informal settlements exist in Southern Europe, for instance, and in other places. And there are people here present today who can actually refer to a number of Southern Europe examples. And it's a regional problem. It's a global problem at the same time. And it's good that we are starting to work. We start a real work, and we have been in great cooperation with our colleagues in Bishkek. And we are putting forward proposals as to offer for financial support of a number of projects. It is our great pleasure to greet our colleagues in Armenia who have been involved in very important efforts in improving and recovering the informal settlements after the earthquakes in Spittak. What is very important, this action plan, recovery action plan, is an outcome of collective efforts. And the experts who are with us, who will be able to tell you about the technical aspects of this topic and how the actions are reflected in this action plan. I believe it will give you a unique opportunity to us all, give us all a unique opportunity to discuss the methodology and the comprehensive approach to recovery, which is very important. And I believe that the presentations that we are going to hear today, both from Stephen, Chrissy, will be very useful for you. You know that this document has been published in Russian as well, and it's posted on our website. We are going to publish it, I believe. And if you need any support, any help after the workshop as to how to implement this methodology, please bear in mind that we are always open for cooperation. And you know that we will have an excellence center soon open, and there will be an office in Yerevan. And using this excellence center, we will be able to translate various materials into Russian, for instance, and we will be able to create a group of international experts who will be able to provide specific assistance in all the recovery efforts in these informal settlements. I would like to say that this recovery action plan was adopted by the Committee for Urban Development as well. So we have a regional mandate for this action plan, and we will be glad if you will refer to this document. And as far as the contents of this document is concerned, we will be pleased to see you all after the workshop if you need certain advice as to how to implement these projects and in which direction to go. It will be our pleasure to provide any assistance we can. And I would like to thank you all for your time. We know that you know it's a pressing time today, and you have to deal with a lot of issues. And I would like to thank the organizers, our colleagues from Geneva, Alexander and Matteo, our experts, our interpreters as well. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. And I would like to wish us all great success with this workshop and further cooperation on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roll, for this comprehensive and inspiring introduction. I shall remind our audience that interpretation is available. There is an interpretation icon in the lower right-hand part of your screen where you can select which language you would like to listen this workshop in. So without further ado, I'll now leave the floor to the first of the key authors of the Recovery Action Plan, Mr. Steven Nystrom. Steven, the floor is yours to introduce this idea of kickstarting the Recovery Action Plan in the best possible way.
Good morning, everyone. It's very early in the morning here in Florida, and let me share my screen with you. And my background is I'm the president of Newstream Companies. And can you see my screen, please? Yes, okay. I am the president of Newstream Companies, and I have an economics background, focusing on land and focusing on growth. I'm one of the primary authors of the guidelines on formalization, which Christy is going to talk a lot about in her presentation. And I'm one of the primary authors on the Recovery Action Plan, which is the primary part of my presentation. We're both going to be talking about implementation, and Rick is also going to be covering land administration as it relates to implementation and the guidelines and the Recovery Action Plan as well. So into the basics of the Recovery Action Plan itself. This is the general structure. The structure of the Recovery Action Plan has essentially 9 broad policy areas. And these policy areas, start my timer, and these policy areas each have a main goal. You'll see the list of the 9 policy areas there, and you'll see that they're essentially covering most of what civil society and the economy of your country essentially covers really all the natures, all the primary nature of what holds your country together and what builds your economy and your society and makes it function. Sorry if I didn't describe that very well, but because it's so broad, we have there's probably 80 or 90 actions underneath each one of these policy areas and a handful of sub goals under each one. So each policy area has a primary goal and then a handful of secondary goals under each one of those. Under each of these secondary goals, you have a handful of specific actions needed to achieve those secondary goals. And if you achieve all the secondary goals, you basically achieve the primary goal of that policy area. Chrissy and Rick are going to be mostly discussing policy area 1 and formalization and land administration and tenure and land rights, cadastre. Mostly that's confined to policy area 1. And now let me go into the structure around the recovery action plan. So that was what you see now, what the recovery action plan is covering, and that's basically everything. When we were working on writing the recovery action plan, we also had 6 policy brief booklets around the recovery action plan, each covering main topics, and all the achievement of the policy areas and the effective utilization of these policy briefs also will build resilience against COVID-19, but it builds a broad type of resilience as well. It also helps to achieve the sustainable development goals also. So around the recovery action plan, we have 6 policy briefs. I believe 5 of them they're all in publishing now. I think 5 of them are going to be published. We might not get the 6th one, but you've got energy, water and sanitation, mobility, food, nature-based solutions, innovative finance. A lot of that is already included within the recovery action plan, but much greater detail was able to be put into the individual small policy briefs for those individual categories. So we've got the recovery action plan, we have the 6 books around that, and then we have city assessment reports, because the plans that we're talking about, the recovery action plan and the policy briefs, are broad concepts. And to bring that down to your local community, we need a good city assessment report to understand the individual problems in your informal settlement that the broader plans are supposed to help solve. So from the city assessment and the recovery action plan and the policy briefs, we then get a city recovery action plan, and that's the goal of this. There's other reference materials as well. There will be, and there is, a lecture series already in the process of being finalized for the guidelines for formalization. And there's another lecture series that we're starting now for the recovery action plan as well. So you're going to have a lot of online resources to look at and get some greater detail beyond what we can talk about here today, what we have necessarily have time for all the detail. So please, I do direct you to those when you have time. Okay, so timing in the recovery action plan. We try to point out, because the individual goals, targets, and actions are very broad, we try to give a sense for how fast the individual components can be achieved, kind of loosely, because a water and sanitation intervention issue may be a very serious, difficult one in some countries and some informal settlements, and it may not be a big problem in others. So when we look at the goals, targets, and actions, we try to estimate how long essentially it would take to accomplish. And you can see with the longer term goals, 1 to 5 years is generally, and we would have a blue circle next to that to show that that's one of the longer term goals. Or maybe we would show, for something that's more emergency focused, loosely defined as can be accomplished in less than 6 months, or maybe 6 months to around a year. So it could be an emergency focused, the red and the yellow. So anyway, so you can see our general timing will be noted within the recovery action plan. Okay, so I don't have time to go over all of the individual policy areas in detail, so I'm just going to talk about one. This is the one that, once again, Chrissy and Rick are going to be talking quite a bit about. But just to show you the structure, on the online lectures, we're going to have one for each one of the policy areas, and they will cover the actions and the targets and the goals in much greater detail. So I won't be hitting that in heavy detail here today. I will direct you to those online resources when they're available. So in this one, we have a main goal that informal settlements are formalized, brought into the formal markets in a just, efficient, and sustainable manner, allowing for broader socioeconomic progress, justice, and the empowerment of the people. Under that, we have the four different 1.1, 1.2, 3, and 4 different sub-goals by which we can reach that broad goal. And under each one of these sub-goals, we have a number of actions to accomplish them. And that's how all the RAP is designed and structured. So I'm not going to, I'll flip through them. This is policy area 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Not spending a lot of time on that at the moment, but you can see once again that starting screen that lists all of the individual policy areas, essentially covering all the main structures and institutions upon which your society functions, and how interventions can be accomplished, and to essentially protect, build resilience against COVID-19 and pandemics, and building resilience in this way also builds resilience against many other things as well. So, okay. I want to spend much of my remaining time on the beginnings of how we would look at implementation. And the first thing I want to point out is that it's very hard to give a step-by-step implementation suggestion because of the wide variety of informal settlements and the wide variety of problems. We can look at implementation more as a process by how you look at the challenges and how you then make the decisions as to what you're going to work on and what you're not. But as an example here, just to show you why we have to describe it in that manner to be effective, looking at example number 4 here, these are 4 different examples of informal communities that could happen out there, similar to other informal settlements we've seen. Number 4, we have large informal communities, low quality, physical, legal, lots of informality issues. And then comparing that to example number 1, where you have a wide average quality informal homes, widespread, but a very large percentage of the housing stock. And then you compare that to number 2, example 2, where you have the main problem is that the building is illegal. It's built on government lands, maybe environmentally sensitive lands, many legal controversies. Or compare that to example 3, where the land was approved. There are little or no legal problems at all, but it was approved for use temporarily. But the settlements are growing and it's not ending. Maybe it's environmentally dangerous. So what I'm trying to get at here is how very different each one of these problems sets are. One implementation plan, step-by-step process, would not be the same for each one, which is why a single solution to this, you have to really look at the specifics of the informal settlement to then make your plans. And I'll talk about how to do that, or at least how to get started with that. Okay, there's going to be in the very beginning, yes, in the very beginning of our analysis of implementation, you're going to see that there's the cost-benefit analysis is going to be very key to making these decisions as to what to focus on and how to solve the problems. And looking at it from the direction of a pestle analysis or a SWOT analysis can be useful. So you look at the issues, positive and negative, from environmental, political, economical, social, technological, legislative levels. You can look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And once again, we're trying to get an idea of how to do a cost-benefit study. A more simplified version, and there are much more complicated ones that I've done in the past, but a much more simplified version, maybe just to look at it from one category of costs, one category of benefits, where you're looking at political costs and political benefits are sort of spread out if it's done well. The economic costs may be very expensive in the beginning, and the benefits you get are going to get later. When you're, and so on with social and legal and environmental issues and technological. But you should very carefully look at your cost benefit studies, because there's only a limited amount of resources with which to solve these problems. Okay, so moving on to the actual, so I want to spend a lot of my time on implementation and cross-cutting themes, and that's kind of where I am now on my list here. So you'll see the first line there, I talk about the cost benefit study. So we just looked at that. So you want to look cost benefit for the various components, and then you want to look at in the recovery action plan, there are many goals, targets, and actions, but you want to look at those goals and targets in relation to your local realities, the local problems, the political ones, the economic ones, because it's not going to be the same in every country, in every settlement, even within the same country. So when you're looking at these actions and targets, consider what the easy ones, the hard ones, and the impossible ones, and think about why. Consider if other people or other organizations can help you overcome some of these problems, maybe making them a little easier. So once you've thought about what you can do and what those list of actions, which of those actions are possible, think about, you then move on to looking at your resources under various scenarios. You know, maybe you're going to just touch on this problem now, but work on it more later. What resources would that take? Or possibly you're going to solve the whole problem now, and thus more resources are required up front for this particular intervention in relation to another one. Once again, I'm talking about the individual actions and targets in the recovery action plan, and you're deciding which ones you're going to do, and with your limited resources. So you're going to look at resources later when you're thinking this through as to what you're going to work on and what you're not. So you look at the policy areas, the goals, targets, and actions in relation to net benefits. So you've got costs, you've got benefits. The ones that, where the benefits greatly outweigh the cost, whether it's short-term benefits or long-term, those are the ones you should focus on, the ones that are going to help the most. And it is going to vary from settlement to settlement. So you're looking at economic benefits, you're looking at other types of benefits, stability, social resilience. There's a variety of different types of benefits. I'm not just talking money. And you're, think about long and short-term benefits as well. So once you've worked your way through analyzing your costs and your benefits, then you're thinking about implementation, actual final implementation decisions. What are you going to do now? And what are you going to do next? So now you start thinking about tier 1 and tier 2 interventions. And you can look at that from a couple of different ways. You can look at it from what you should do first and what you should do later, because you only have a certain amount of resources and time. You should also potentially look at that from the what is most important and what is less important. And you compare that to your cost benefit, and you make your implementation decisions based upon weighing those factors. And there are other ways of looking at what is a tier 1 and tier 2 intervention as well. But consider that, what's most important, what's realistic within your resources and your political and social will. So at this point, you're ready to actually develop a strategic implementation plan. The strategic plan, you've decided which ones are most important, which ones you should do first and why. Now you time out how you're actually going to do your plan. You relook at your resources and you gather them and the political and social will at that point. And then you begin the implementation. As you're implementing, you're going to find some things are going to work well, other things are going to work less well. So you should be ready to adjust your planning based upon early stage performance, because you want obviously to focus on the things that are going to be successful. So you may have to readjust. You may have to re-examine your timing at various stages while you're working on it, and even the political and social will, because things can change. You should take your victories where you can. Some of these are going to be accomplished pretty quickly, and for the benefits of the public, both political will, social will, and just the benefit of the action or target or goal being accomplished, you should take those victories as you can. Now, once you go through one round of solving problems, you are going to be left with some of those that you thought were harder or impossible. So you can look at some of these more difficult targets and actions and goals and decide, okay, now that we've finished the first set, can we come back and look and accomplish some of those other ones? Which of those have the net benefits? Or if there were problems, have we solved them? And then maybe even around 3 of interventions after that. At some point, you're only left with the really, really difficult or impossible ones, and you re-examine. So that's a general implementation plan, a planning process by which you would work through this. And this is probably at some point going to be another possible additional book. There's an implementation concept for the formalization side as well, which may feed into this a similar or the same even guide on how to accomplish the implementation process of both the recovery action plan and the guidelines for formalization in general. So I wanted to move on. I think I am running a little bit low on time, but I have a couple more minutes. I wanted to talk to you about cross-cutting themes and really cross-sector problem solving. So all of the, whether it's the guidelines for formalization and your formalization problems, or whether we're talking about the recovery action plan and that broad list of policy areas, some things are very similar. You're in all of these, you're going to be looking at problem identification. You want to go after the cause of the problem, not focused completely on the symptoms, because if you don't solve the cause, it's going to come back again. So understanding your problem is, I can't overstate how important that is. Data gathering is going to be key to making good decisions. If you have bad data, it's very hard to come up with good decisions. So that's going to be key throughout all the process of formalization as well as the recovery action plan. You want to, and then it comes down to planning. That's the cost benefit analysis, that's timetables, it's understanding the socio-political realities you're dealing with, gathering consensus, communication. You want a very flexible strategy, and you'll want to come back and look at it and adapt it later. The next step is communication, and you're obtaining and retaining your political and social will. This also can't be understated. Well, it can be understated. It can't be overstated. Without the will, it's just not going to, without good messaging and flexible messaging and will throughout the process, it's very hard to get any of these things accomplished. So it's very key to keep people involved and keep people informed and get broad sustained support and keep that throughout the program. Lastly, the last cross-cutting theme I wanted to talk about is the balanced and flexible adaptation to changing circumstances. Things are going to change. We're going to work through various parts of your policy area, the actions and targets and goals, as well as formalization. And you're going to want to, and things are going to work well and other parts aren't. You're going to have to be able to adjust to the changes. So be flexible in your thinking, and you're much greater chance of being more successful. And I do believe that is about the end of my time. So thank you very much. And I look forward to your questions, and I hope we were able to help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for this very comprehensive introduction to the structure and the goals of the Recovery Action Plan. Thank you in particular for stressing how the Recovery Action Plan is designed to help cities build resilience above and beyond the emergencies of COVID-19. Also to stress the importance, of city assessment reports to well localize the Recovery Action Plan. So collaborations from the localities will be central in implementing this plan, and also for stressing the fact that there are different kinds of informality and there is no one-size-fits-all solution, which is also something that will come back in today's workshop. Finally, for stressing the importance of cost-benefit analysis as the foundation for dividing the interventions in terms of feasibility. And finally, for stressing also the importance of flexibility and adaptation for the Recovery Action Plan. I think this provided a nice and solid stage for the rest of the interventions. So without further ado, I give the floor to Professor Potsiu, who is going to explain to us how the Recovery Action Plan and the guidelines for formalization constitute a unicum and are equally important. Professor Porziu, the floor is yours. Professor, you're on mute.
Okay, yes. Okay, good morning, everybody. Dobro utra. Up to this, I can speak your language. For the next 20 minutes, I'm trying to give you some brief information about the background of what we are doing for many years, as Gulnara Erol has mentioned, for the newcomers. And then I will give you the overall process for formalization, and then I will speak a little bit how the recovery action plan fits within the overall process for formalization, and then how these two publications, the guidelines for formalization and the recovery action plan, complement each other, and how we can implement those in parallel, and then some anticipated common challenges that we face when we implement. So, as you may be already aware, we have already three publications on informal settlements, and the first one is the self-made cities. So this is a general overview of the challenges and the problem, then some city assessment of the projects, actually not city, but country assessment of the projects, ongoing projects for formalization, and then the guidelines for formalization. And we consider as informal real estate those constructions that lack property titles, planning and building permits, or are all built in excess of such permits. And mostly they are residential, but not exclusively. We have a variety of types that can be self-made or made by professional constructors also. And the important thing here is to remember that in many cases, constructions and the residents remain unregistered and without documentation. And this blocks down the whole formalization project and the economy, because these people are depending on a daily income. And when we are talking about COVID, this is very important. So what to remember from here is that housing is important, that when we have large amounts of numbers of informal constructions, this means that our systems, land management systems, are inefficient. And of course, we need not only the state to provide housing, but also the private sector and a cooperation. And when neither the state nor the private sector are interested to provide appropriate supply for people according to their needs, then we have a lot of informality, and residents should be empowered according to the Sustainable Development Agenda. Now, what we have found out from our research so far is that we should empower people by providing as much as we can clear titles and property registration, because according to the Sustainable Development Agenda and Sustainable Goal 1, against poverty, title issuing and registration empowers residents. It can improve security against land grabbing and evictions, which is very, very important for the COVID period. It can improve living conditions, again, very important for the COVID period. It can create marketable property units, and people can move easily and can rent, they can sell if they want, and they can go where they can find better job, because very important also for the post-COVID and the COVID period, because we have too much unemployment, increased unemployment, and can enable funding and further improvements, again, very important for the COVID period. So all this empowers people against the pandemic, but also gives us the opportunity to provide a spatial data infrastructure for fair decision-making, and also for the provision of the humanitarian support, which is very, very important. Of course, we understand that we should have improvements because it's a multiple social, economic, and environmental impact, the informal constructions, and we should improve the neighborhoods and the constructions. But also, here it is very important, we should also develop tools how to increase the urban density once we formalize. This is really important in most of informal settlements when they are formalized. And of course, when we cannot formalize, we should have decent resettlement and treatment of the debris. And let's move to the next slide. Here, I want to mention that fortunately the UNECE was well prepared to provide the recovery action plan in time. And now we are at the stage to decide how to implement it in order to acquire resilience against the pandemic. This is the important thing, and to build back better again. So for this, we need to agree that we need to prioritize according to the risks of its informal settlement, as Stephen mentioned earlier. And then we need to discuss how we systematically prepare the local pandemic risk reduction plans, and also any other kind of disaster risk reduction plans. We will hear later about the seismic, for example. And now what to remember is that we need to formalize all existing informal settlements. Otherwise, we need to resettle properly in order to build back better, but also to get prepared for building resilience to the pandemic. Why? Because residents must be protected against poverty, climate change, COVID-19, and other disasters. Why now? Because now we have a big impact of COVID-19. It is anticipated that we will have even more new poor globally due to COVID, and informal settlements have a lot problems. COVID has a higher localization there. And the pandemic, don't forget, does not recognize legal and physical boundaries. People move around and people work around. And so restoring global health is an uppermost priority. So now I will try to give you a brief description of the guidelines. This is the structure of the guidelines. I'm sure that many of you have read the booklet and you remember. So we have already prepared lectures for each stage of the guidelines for formalization. So you can hear information why to formalize and the overall description of the overall process of formalization, how to develop a strategy, lectures 2 and 3. It is very, very important. How to prepare the framework for formalization and how to implement it. And the value of having inclusive title issuing and inclusive property registration, and also things we have to do to improve settlements and neighborhoods and constructions in parallel, and actions to be taken further. Now, we have put an emphasis on formalization of titles because, as Stephen said, building back better and improving settlements and constructions varies from place to place, from country to country, from settlement to settlement, as is also the recovery action plan for COVID. And for that, we need the specific disaster risk reduction plans, and to keep in mind that continuously we have to build back better our systems, our tools, and plan for all these registration planning, pro-growth planning and permitting, affordable housing, fair taxation, evaluation, education, professional ethics. It is very important, the involvement of society in the private sector, because all countries are going through these improvements continuously. Now, what to remember when you try to prepare the formalization strategy? You need to prepare background paper, as most of you have already done, the causes, the size of the problem, the types, etc. And then at the same time, you need to organize the political support and raise awareness among society, because people, it's a participatory process and people need to support your effort, and the opposition, or the political opposition, and the academics and the professionals, all of them. So then you need to prepare an inventory map, use all kind of new technology for that, and classify land use types, and also classify construction types in a simple way. Try to make it as simple as possible. Few classes, few categories, and then collect the data about the population and the residents. There also you will need also to collect data that relate to the recovery action plan, number of people, size of families, income, ethnicity, etc. Then prepare the cost benefit analysis, which maybe we need to have a specific publication on that because it is very, very important. And write down the expected benefits and the possible quick wins for the politicians. It is very important to see quick wins of each project. Then agree for a fit for purpose formalization process and prioritization of our actions. Then develop the communication plan to inform all the society, and draft the strategy report and get an approval. Now, things to remember when you prepare the formalization framework is how to define the zones for formalization zones and the categories of buildings, of constructions, and keep in mind that you must also always preserve protected areas within and outside these zones. It is very important also for the COVID recovery action plan. Then when you classify the types of legal informality, you need to get the political decision to provide title issuing affordably. Fees and charges is important in an affordable manner, and to provide planning amnesty. These are the legal informalities that you need a political decision. Then, of course, you have to identify the types of technical construction informality. For example, a non-compliance to the standards for ventilation, for seismic safety, whatever. Then you have to classify the risks, and according to that, to classify the inspections. Please avoid on-site inspections as much as possible. Of course, in some family constructions and complex buildings, you cannot avoid that. But for small and mid-sized constructions, you can provide operational permits, but ensure that occupants accept the risks and are aware of actions to be taken for safety. And then, of course, design the formalization process, standardize the documentations and the procedures, and clear out the roles of the various involved institutions, define the registration process, provide property titles that are not legally bound with any requirements for planning and construction improvements, and define the administration system, decide about the infrastructure and the technical facilities that will support the whole process, determine the levels of penalties and fees, and prepare the legal framework, which is also a very serious thing to do, and then start for the formalization of constructions. And what to remember here, that you have to receive and process the applications as efficient, in an efficient manner, electronically and free of charge, and provide all kinds of certificates electronically, and don't charge the certificates that needed people to collect for formalization. And collect the penalties and fees, be careful about the affordability, then register the constructions in a simple manner, avoid special lists and complicated lists, just provide clear titles, and we don't need to write any pending inspections on the titles. This is another somebody else's responsibility. Then provide titles and allow transactions. This is very important. Allow transactions and mortgages, even if the construction is poor, it can be transferred and then improvements can be made by a next owner. Then monitor the process and make all necessary adjustments, uncover the problems that appear. And of course, you should address all the legal issues that may appear during this process, that I know that they are very complex. And therefore, here I suggest that we should consider mediation procedures, not to avoid going through the court process to solve all the legal issues, but to allow mediation and speed up the title issuing, and then report openly. And then, of course, we have the parallel actions to develop the local disaster risk reduction plans and prioritize the risks. And here, of course, we should prioritize the pandemic risk and then actions to build our systems better. And now here I will tell you a little bit how to prepare the pandemic disaster risk reduction based on the exposure to the pandemic of its informal settlement and the society's vulnerability, the economic, physical, environmental, social, institutional, cultural vulnerability. First of all, you have to read and follow the directions, the national directions about the pandemic. And then you have to collect all historical, geospatial, and demographic data from the current COVID 2-year experience to estimate the risk in the various informal settlements, in the various informal zones, and always in relation to the progress of the formalization. So once you have categorized the informal zones that can be formalized through the formalization process, then you have also to estimate the risk of each zone. And then you have to assess and identify the municipal resources, human, technical, medical resources, and identify the risks and classify according to the vulnerability and the progress of formalization into low, mid, and high risk zones. Then to ensure and identify some possible donors for your interventions, then to identify the current available geospatial data sources and improve them, use the inventory for informal constructions and improve it with additional data and information, and mark the key land marks there, hospitals, clinics, intensive care units, medical staff, etc., and service networks and all that. Then mark the areas that, the gathering areas that pose the greatest risk, map the safe green areas for the people, map the routes, map which buildings are frequently used and accumulate a lot of people, because there you need to have interventions, understand what is already done according to the 9 policy areas to manage the pandemic so far, and how to go from now until the end of the pandemic. And understand exactly what is the reality, what needs to be done, and according to the numbers of affected people and the economic damage. Then recognize how much residual extensive risk is in front of you, what more is needed, and the legal issues for mitigation and preparedness measures, how to minimize the residual risk. And then prioritize in terms of feasibility study, as Stephen said, and the existing resources, then arrange the budget allocation, internal and external funds, then identify the responsible organization. Usually we have already established emergency operation centers in the municipalities. I'm sure that many of you already have, and confirm the pandemic risk reduction plan with the relative authorities. And now here very briefly, I will tell you how all this activity fits in the formalization process. When you develop the strategy, you also develop the local pandemic risk reduction plan. And then when you prepare the framework for formalization, you define the pandemic risk in the various zones, you define the legal and regulatory issues, you define the appropriate implementation actions, the administrative roles, so the responsibilities, the penalties, and the involved institutions for the pandemic, managing the pandemic. And then again, when you formalize the constructions, then you in parallel implement the measures for the pandemic, the actions that you need to do, and the works that you need to do. And then of course you have to monitor in parallel. When you monitor the formalization, you monitor also the pandemic. And here for the pandemic, you need to modify, to be able to modify daily. This is very important, and you do some training. And then the building back better is similar. Very quickly, I will tell you some of the challenges that you face for both projects. It is a very complex problem, and corruption is always there. So you have to care about that. then you have to care not to have overlapping responsibilities. Then, of course, you have to develop the strategy, the timetable to prioritize. This is crucial, not to try to solve everything at once. It is very crucial. Then, of course, you have to be ready to modify legislation. It is very important. We usually say that we have weak capacity and lack of funds, but the problem actually is that we have problems to identify the local experts and to involve the local experts. This is very, very important. And then we actually have problems in aligning funding. Not that we don't have enough funds, but we cannot align funding very easily. Then we need to simplify the problems to the politicians, as I mentioned earlier, to show the benefits and the quick results, and to use the appropriate technology and to address the underlying constraints. This is really important. We have experienced that at first hand in all countries, and for the formalization and for the pandemic. We have opposition in everything, political opposition, ethical issues that we have to overcome, cultural and religious. We see how religions sometimes are opposing vaccinations, a lot of legal challenges and administrative challenges. And then, of course, we have to involve the private sector. It is very, very important for both projects, and to consider about public-private partnerships for certain functions, for example, digitalization of services, automation, etc. To engage society, as Stephen said, it is really important, and to develop the risk reduction plans. And in order to finish, I will again remind you not to make it complicated and not to try to solve everything. And please remember what Albert Einstein has said: learn from yesterday, live for today, and hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Potsiu. You really provided our participant with an extensive and comprehensive list of areas and actions, concrete actions and steps that can be taken to accelerate, to really bring the recovery action plan up and running in the shortest possible time, really kick-starting. In particular, I think 3 or 4 things will come back during our workshop, our cross-cutting teams. The first is your accent on affordability and convenience of the measures regarding the citizens, both in terms of getting the necessary data from them, but also in terms of providing them with titles and certificates. So implementing the recovery action plan can also accelerate other components of public administration, which are often very much needed, including the digital provision of certificates. The second thing is the fact that building in parallel and together the formalization process and the recovery action plan can also improve the existing inventories of data and information of the state and of the cities. So it's a great opportunity to build better data sets upon which to build further decision-making processes in the future. Third, it's the fact that by building the frameworks for both together, one can must accelerate the other. So formalization accelerates the recovery action plan and vice versa. So it's also a great opportunity for really improving the living conditions of our cities. And the final point that I'd like to stress, and we'll come back to, is the key importance of involving local experts and talent on the ground. And maybe in the Q&A, I will ask you to elaborate a little bit on this. So what are some useful pointers that you can provide our participants about how to do that? Because often our talent is invisible to us ourselves, the talent we have in our countries and on the ground. So thank you very much. And now we move to the third and final presentation from the lead authors of the Recovery Action Plan. Rick Wouters is going to explain to us one fundamental infrastructure of all of this, which are registry and land registries and cadastre. Mr. Wouters, the floor is yours. You are on mute, Mr. Wouters.
Well, thank you, Matteo, for this hint and also for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. My name, as said, is Rick Wouters, and I'm a former staff member of the Dutch Cadastral Land Registry and Mapping Agency in the Netherlands. I will talk about Policy 1, and then more specifically, I will address the following questions. Why is land administration so important? Why are key registers? What are key registers and why do we need them? How to acquire relevant data, and how to build or improve a land administration. First of all, some terminology, because there are a lot of terms around in this presentation and sometimes they are also confusing. The cadastre is the register of real estate objects, land parcels, buildings, pipelines, dwellings. The land register is a registration of real estate titles to ownership or lease or mortgage or usufruct. There are many more. The cadastral map is the graphical representation of the location of a parcel, building or pipeline. And the land administration is in fact a combination of these three, sometimes only two or even one of them. And then the land registry is the organization responsible for the recording of the data and sharing of information, sometimes called cadastre. In the Netherlands, we call it cadastre. In England, for instance, the land registry, but we have similar tasks, integrated tasks of the cadastre and the land register. In some countries, we see that this task is divided into a land registry and a cadastre, like in Germany or like in Croatia. Other relevant terminology, land tenure, that is the legal regime in which land is owned by an individual, the landholder. Tenure security is the certainty that a person's right to land will be recognized by others and protected in case of specific challenges. Titling is the process of assigning real estate titles to a person and recording them in a land registry. Formalization is the action to officially register a real estate object as a legally owned property. Then the key register is a state register that contains high quality data maintained by the so-called custodian, and synonyms are basic register or authentic register. And NSDI is the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, which concentrate on geospatial data. Well, let's have a look at the cadastre and the land registry. Information in the cadastre is typically the parcel, size of the parcel, whether the parcel is built or unbuilt, the owner, or in some cases the user, the tax income, tax value, a reference to a mortgage. There are many more possible attributes in the cadastre, and here you see a book from the 1820s from the Netherlands. Information in the land register is typically the title holder, the types of titles, but also the restrictions and servitudes. And in most cases, we also see a deed of transfer, the official document for the buying and selling of a property. Well, and then the cadastral map, here an example also from the Netherlands, a very old example, 1825, and the map typically shows a parcel boundaries, the building in the red boxes, and some simple basic topography. In the Netherlands, we use the precise boundaries, and then we call it the cadastral map, but sometimes it's not very much precise, and then we talk about general boundaries and refer to an index maps, where the idea is to present the parcels and the parcel number. Well, data gathering, as Christy also talked about, is very important. And for our goals in the Recovering Action Plan and formalization projects, but also for Cadastral, there are many examples of attributes, data we like to record in our registers, like real estate objects, legal owners, informal constructions, number of people, etc., etc. As we have seen, data can be in textual form, yes or no location bound, and they also can be in the form of a map. How to acquire data? Well, I would say that reuse of existing data is the best way to acquire data, because to collect new data, it's very expensive, time consuming. So I would say only when it is strictly needed for your information required, then I would say collect new data. What sources are already available is an important question, and there is more than you think. In the Netherlands, there are thousands of data sets available. We will have a quick look at what are the key registers and why do we need them in one of the following sheets. But first, let's have a look at an example of how to acquire data. Nowadays, aerial photographs are widely available, and it is easy to identify the individual dwellings on such a photo. And then it's also easy to add more information. Here, the green dots refer to dwellings where the tax has been paid. The yellow dots refer to objects under construction. And important also to see that in the red dots, we have dwellings where no tax has been paid, but also no registration has been done yet. So for building up a strategy, such a simple photo with additional information can be a great help. It's also good to consider crowdsourcing as one of the options to acquire data. It is a cheap solution, and also to improve data, it works very well. We have a few examples from the Netherlands. Here you see the monument posts around the border of the Netherlands. There are about 300. And it's quite easy now because walkers and hikers wish to report when there are problems with these monuments. And in the early days, an official from Cadastral has to travel along the border a few times a year to see if everything was in order. Another example is here the topographic map, where people are able to report on mistakes or errors they see in the map. And of course, we will also report back to those people what we did with their remarks. Sometimes it's really mistakes, sometimes it can be a misunderstanding, of course. Well, and then an overview of data sources. So if you start searching for data, then it's good to know that there are state registers, and some of them we call key registers. And the land administration data sets are usually state registers, and in some cases, key registers. But there are many more data sets available at the municipality or in institutes, at the universities, available in the private sector, but also the Central Bureau of Statistics, of course, has a wealth of information available. So it is worthwhile to make a search in all of these data sets. To complicate it a bit more, we have also the NSDI data sets, the spatial data sets, and those we find at state level, but also in the municipality, institutes, and other sectors which I just mentioned. To pay attention to all of these data sets is really worthwhile because, as I said, to collect new data is very time-consuming and expensive. Okay, so we talked already about the key register, which is a special register. And why is it special? Because as you can see in the right-hand lower corner, the key registers are defined in the law. Key registers are interlinked, for instance, via a person or via an address, a location. They should be 100% precise. Now, that is not so easy, of course, to reach 100% quality, but The law also urged the custodian to have an active control on the quality and make sure that the quality is improved all the time. Government institutions making use of key registers are also asked to report on errors. And the slogan is collect once and use many times. So in this example, you see different key registers like the population register connected to the person, the business register connected to the company, and then we have the building and others registers. At the other hand, we have also the property, the title and location registers. Together, we can call that the land administration. And then we also have in the Netherlands a tax value as a key register. When implementing where to start, well, as we said, it is very important to determine priorities and what data to collect and at what quality. And it's good to do that in an integral way. So to collect the data not only for the land registers, but also for the formalization process and also for building back better. Make sure that all stakeholders have their input. And working towards an NSDI is important, the National Spatial Data Infrastructure. Well, when building a system of key registers, it's important to see who can take the lead in the governance. Could it be the Minister of Interior, Housing, Environment? In North Macedonia, it was even the Prime Minister who would take the lead in this. Who will be responsible for the action? And that can be, of course, the Land Registry and Cadastral Agency, because they already have a number of key registers under them, or potential key registers, but it can also be a separate body to coordinate all activities. Financing is an important aspect, of course. It can be the private sector or the public sector. And income can be generated in various means by taxation, fees, charges, and contributions, etc. While building a land administration system, we can also use the fit-for-purpose approach. So not only for the formalization process, but also for the setup of the land administration. The approach says that we should define basic requirements, and that's important because it should be really basic requirements. It must be a not too fancy system. So we have to keep it simple. We have to make sure that we can make an incremental improvement and make it not better than required. So experts tend to have nice features all the time, but I would say stick to the basic requirements and make it fit for use. We have three important blocks in this approach. That is the spatial framework, the legal framework, and the institutional framework. And the spatial framework includes aerial imageries for countrywide applications, the participatory field adjudication or even formalization can also be part of the spatial framework. If we have a look at the legal framework, then it's important that the framework is inclusive, transparent, and also simple. And it should also here help us, and it should be not a blockade. So law should be an enabler. Law on legalization and formalization is needed, as also Chrissy said. Special attention to legal position and the institutional setting. The law defines, in fact, the contours of the agency of the land registry and the cadastre, and pay attention to the dissemination of information freely available and free of charge. That should be arranged for in the law. Then the institutional framework, in most cases, also in your countries, it is a matter of improving, because in all of the countries there is already a sort of institution active. So it is important to define or redefine the role of land registry and cadastre, preferably in one agency, and if not, then there should be a good partnership between the land registry and cadastre. and define the role of all the actors, the notaries, the lawyers, surveyors, and courts, and describe the organizational setup, like here an example from Greece, and identify what expertise is needed and what volume. Also here, a very important factor for the success. Well, while building or improving land registry and cadastre, it's important to redefine the processes of registration, including the role of all actors. And you can project that in a graphic like here, illustrated. Important is to register all real estate objects, no matter what status it is. We strive to 100% coverage, and then it is for us in the land administration not so important whether the object is maybe informal or illegal. So collect titles in a systematic way. Make sure that one unique key is defined for each parcel so that we can link the different registers to each other. Make use of municipal information on buildings, users, and metadata. There is also here already a lot of information available, sometimes really unknown. All information should, of course, be in digital format and pay ample attention to the IT design of the database and the functionality. Well, and then to make a map, make use of already existing maps. Also here, the municipality and private sector might have already maps which serves the goal. And centimeter precision for mapping of boundaries is not required, at least not always. So I would say keep also this at a modest level. That saves a lot of time and costly involvement of surveyors. An index map covers most of the time the needs. So in apartment buildings, boundaries are clear, but take attention for the land plot itself, the common spaces and the common utilities. Also, the map should be in digital form, and we can use standards like GIS systems, GeoMedia, ArcGIS, MapInfo, and open source GIS. Aerial photos for identification and delimitation of parcels is very important, and it also serves building back better needs for additional information as well. And assure the consistency between the cadastre, the land register, and the cadastral map. Crucial, I would say. So check if a building register is available. And I will not dwell on this too much. It is a trivial register maybe, but it's so important that we have a very thorough building register in place with 100% coverage. And that is true also for addresses. It should be a 100% reliable register. So to identify and link uniquely objects to persons, for instance. And these registers serve not only the land administration, they also serve very well the formalization process and also the recovering action plan. So to wrap up, tenure security is a basic condition for economic development and in general the rule of law. The land administration is a crucial infrastructure and serving many goals. Property data should be 100% reliable, and therefore we propose to have key registers in place. And pay attention to registers as buildings and addresses. For building or improving a land administration, use the fit-for-purpose methodology. And keep the land administration as simple as possible. And maybe you should have a look at the example from Australia, where it is really an administrative system with no courts involved at all. Build what is strictly needed and stick to the requirements. Do it in an incremental way and therefore have a step-by-step approach ready. And make sure that all stakeholders are involved in the design of the functionality of the registers and the maps. And last but not least, seek for best practices in your own country, but also seek for international support. I thank you for your interest in this presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wouters, for this comprehensive illustration of the role, also from an historical perspective of land and housing data, and also for stressing how the Recovery Action Plan, once again, is an opportunity to accelerate changes and improvements that may be already in the pipelines for many countries. In this case, the improvement of land registries, cadastral, whatever we want to call them, which are once again a fundamental bedrock for other decision-making processes in the future, and also for pointing out the necessity to develop cost-effective ways of collecting data, which is also something Stephen and Chrissy referred to, and in particular for stressing the promises of crowdsourcing data for to integrate in these structures, in these data structures. So we are running a little bit over time, so we decided to do the following. We will have one final Q&A. So we skip the Q&A that was in the agenda right now. We take a 10 minutes break now. We meet again at 11.1, around 11.5. And then we get to the localities, and then we have one final Q&A with all the materials. So I would take a break now and stretch your legs, go get some coffee, and we'll see you back at 11, around 11.2, 11.5. Thank you very much, and see you in 10 minutes. Hope you had a refreshing break, because we are about to delve into the concrete situation of the localities. As per our agenda, we will start now with hearing the rich and very, very illustrative experience of the city of Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan. So without any further ado, I give the floor to Ms. Aygul Kochorbeva, Head of the Planning and Economic Department of the Mayoral Office of Bishkek. Ms. Kochorbeva, the floor is yours.
Здравствуйте, это Айгуль. Я представляю.
Hello, I'm Icon.
I represent the State and Public Department for Capital Construction of the Mayor's Office of Bishkek.
Bishkek.
I do have a presentation to share
in just a second
with the participants.
Όχι.
So in the meantime, while we wait for the presentation, that the concrete and specific features of each setting are taken into account in designing the response plan. We can see only the web browser. Ms. Aigul, okay. Now it's better. If you could open the PowerPoint presentation.
Я извиняюсь, вам видно, да, презентация?
Can you see the presentation now on your screens?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Наша организация занимается осуществлением развития.
Our organization is involved in the development of informal settlements in Bishkek. We are a customer, and we also carry out technical surveillance in the area of urban developments, engineering, communications, and design social and cultural facilities as well. Bishkek has a population of about 1 million people. It's the capital of the Kyrgyz Republic, and it's located on one of the transit routes of Central Asian corridor, as we refer to it. The population has been growing since 1989 due to urbanization. And over the next decade, it will grow by 40%. It is by 400,000 people from today's number. The majority of the population on the outskirts of the city was due to the informal settlements. We currently have 47 informal settlements on the outskirts of the city, with population exceeding 10,000 people in each. And that's about 28% of the total population of the city. And the first informal settlements emerged more than 30 years ago. The reasons for internal migration in the Kyrgyz Republic, one of the reasons at least, is that the city provides more opportunities for better quality education. And then it also provides opportunities for employment, as well as provides better access to healthcare. Our research has shown that the search for jobs is the reason for 33% of migrants to move into the city. And then there are other factors as well: education, improving their material status, and there's a number of other people who migrate to due to other reasons. The majority of these migrants are young people. The problem of informal settlements in the city, the main problems for the residents of informal settlements are the electricity supply, potable water supply, hot water supply, then heating, sewerage, road infrastructure, fire safety, providing access to transport and educational institutions, healthcare institutions, and cultural entities. Secondly, it's the lack of educational institutions. It actually brings to an additional load on educational institutions within the city, as well as inputs to transportation problems and creating traffic jams. Many of the dwellings are in unsafe and environmentally unsafe areas. The security for the residents of these people in those areas is also questionable because they were squandered and they remain unlegalized, unformalized, and the state support is not sufficient. In the majority of cases, these individual housings are built without design documentation that would be approved by the architectural department and urban development department of the city. Some of them were redesigned, and these buildings were redesigned, and they do not meet the initial goal, design goal. The so-called invisible citizens are the citizens that do not have official documents, ID documents, and the people remain unseen by the state management system. They definitely experience difficulties and issues in accessing various social and economic services. That's how the informal settlements look like. These are the roads within these informal settlements, and only 20% of the roads inside the informal settlements are asphalt covered. Only the main portions of these roads have tarmac. Working in the joint project of UNECE and the sustainable development of sustainable urban development and the comprehensive modernization for informal settlements, taken into account the population, the mayor's office of Bishkek and its structural units have worked out a concept program to modernize 5 informal settlements and create industrial and logistical centers in 2 of the informal settlements. This program is being implemented within the framework of the projects for sustainable development of cities of UNECE and has been technically supported by the UNECE's program for housing areas, and is supported by the Cabinet of Ministers and the administration of the President of the Kyrgyz Republic. The project is focused on 5 informal settlements, and this project is going to be piloted in these 5 areas and will serve as a good example for sustainable development for all other informal and formal settlements in the city. About 75,000 people will directly benefit from this project. The program will be worked out based on the comprehensive and inclusive approach to urban development in order to cover the low-income households by means of modernizing the urban services and improving social and economic infrastructure. Children will also benefit from it because they will be provided access to education, and that would allow the parents to pay more attention to some other tasks except for the childcare tasks. And this project will definitely improve the health of the population by means of improving the waste management approaches and providing water supply to these informal settlements. There will be a component of economic development and jobs will be created. That is, the employment will improve and it will also meet the needs of young people.
Работа в пилотном проекте восстановления
The work in this pilot project, recovery of the economic and financial systems at the local level and improving sustainability in the course of the pandemic. The mayor's office of Bishkek works together with UNECE and carrying out the following activities. We have carried out the primary assessment of the impact of the COVID infection on the urban economy in accordance with the methodology worked out by UNECE. Then a detailed diagnostic project of the impacts of COVID-19 using the actual data based on the methodology provided by UN Habitat and Development Investment, UN Development Investment Fund. We have carried out together a number of joint events in online format. As to the strategy on the economic recovery and sustainability after the COVID-19 pandemic, the Kyrgyz Republic is trying to resolve the following issues: improving investment, providing support to carrying out gender-focused policy for migrants, improving social assistance that would cover new vulnerable groups, enhancing the opportunities, employment opportunities, and using these opportunities, among other things.
Besides, the Asian Development Bank made funds available for the project as part of emergency assistance to improve healthcare, to get medical supplies and equipment. During the pandemic, the vulnerable population groups have been affected in informal settlements. In search for jobs, they moved to the capital, but their living conditions and access to services have remained at the level of remote areas. Internal migrants are most vulnerable in terms of access to state and municipal services. They are exposed to the challenges of COVID-19 restrictions. They lack registration documents, and many of them could not receive medical or humanitarian assistance. Most people faced challenges while moving to online operations because they lack access to internet or devices. They have lost their income or sustenance. Recovery measures taken by the government. To address the formalization issues in Bishkek, the president of the Kyrgyz Republic signed a law providing for changes for amending the law on the transformation of land parcels. This document has to address the problems that have existed for many years. For instance, it addresses the issue of titling, provides for a new procedure, and provides clarifications to the agencies that people can turn to. Given the difficulties and challenges faced by the people in the country against the backdrop of the pandemic, the law provides exemptions for paying compensation in connection with agricultural losses. It should be noted that until recently, landholders had to pay the opportunity costs for agricultural losses. Now they are exempt. There are also measures relating to the development of infrastructure. Now the goals and targets in connection with formalization. There's a need for a comprehensive approach to address the following priority targets. First, in the area of education and healthcare, construction of modern school and preschool facilities, construction of medical establishments. Two, in the area of environment, sanitation, safe and quality water supply and sewerage, complete access to gas supplies, designing and construction of utilities and engineering communications in terms of energy supplies, heating, sanitation, water supply, fire safety, designing and constructing a network of roads, a system of lighting, green spaces, and the construction of waste processing plants. In the area of financial and economic resilience, designing and constructing facilities in that area or adjacent areas to provide employment opportunities for the population, etc. After implementing all those measures, the city will benefit from a reduction in poverty and unemployment. The burden on educational establishments will be lessened in the central part of the city. There will be less congestion in transportation. fewer traffic jams, and the environmental protection will be improved. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kochorbeva, for presenting not only a multidimensional challenge, for showing how the challenge of informal settlement crosscuts and interacts with a number of other fields: the environment, environmental safety, transportation, the economy, and so on and so forth, but also for sharing with us some concrete measures that bravely the administration of Bishkek and the country of Kyrgyzstan have been taken to amend those challenges. So those were all very precious pointers that we will treasure. And now I would move to the second experience, second local experience. We have Ms. Tanya Arzumanian from the Urban Development Committee of Armenia, who will share about the experiences on addressing the challenges of informal settlements, or DOMICs, in the 1988 Spitak earthquake zone in the cities of Gyumri, Banatzdar, and Spitak in Armenia. Ms. Tanya, the floor is yours. Tanya, I think you're on mute.
Շնորհակալություն։ Չգիտեմ ինչ-որ, հիմա հասկանանք։ Հիմա եք լսում։ Նորմալ է արդեն։ Միջոցառման
Dear organizers of the event, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, experts. First of all, I would like to greet you all, and I would like to thank UNECE for once again giving us this opportunity to raise such significant issues and to have a discussion on the matter of today's topic. And also, I would highly appreciate
the projects
the UNECE area non-formal settlements COVID-19 response and recovery plan development. And even though I would like to unfortunately mention that in the areas of the region, including Armenia, the countries in the region and in Armenia have not yet overcome the COVID-19 challenges and have not yet arrived at the post-COVID-19 stage. Today, I will try to present in Armenia the experience with informal settlements as well as the COVID-19 challenges and I will present general overview or in relation to the residents' challenges in the informal settlements. First of all, I would like to say that these informal settlements in Armenia were formed after the 1988 earthquake in the disaster zones, and they were actually temporary settlements or temporary housing solutions for the population who had lost their permanent housing in the earthquake, up to the point when their housing issues would receive a permanent solution. I would like to remind you that after the earthquake, along with massive housing constructions that were depleted or destroyed, we had 8.9 million square meter housing fund that was destroyed or partially or fully, of which 4.1 million was owned by the state and 4.8 million was privately owned. Even though after the earthquake, as in the former Soviet Union, as well as in the Armenian Republic, budget means, as well as charity and humanitarian funds were used in the previous years to build housing for these people in these settlements and in these towns. We still have over 7,000 informal structures known as domics or wagons, where people still live after 30 years after the earthquake, up to this day. As I already mentioned, these domics were initially meant for temporary housing, and they are mostly made of metal, of wood, and other non-permanent construction materials. And after exploitation for over 30 years, they're physically depleted. And of course, because of the unfavorable weather conditions, they are even more depleted, and they do not protect the population from weather conditions. And in order to protect themselves, people have individually and autonomously built some stone constructions and structures around them. For you to visually understand what this is, with your permission, I would like to share Shirak Kentron NGO's photos, and you will see the situation on site. So this is a domic settlement, a district, a neighborhood consisting of these wagons, and I would like to share a few photos for you to understand the accessibility and in general the general condition and state that these domics and the wagons are in. So I will simply try and scroll down for you to see that we have both wood materials here, we have metal materials here, and in some cases you can notice that in some parts we have the residents built walls, and we have stone walls around the metal coverage. I would like to describe the situation. They are mostly located in the northern part of Armenia, in Shirak and Lori marshes of Armenia, and we have some domics also in Aragazodon. According to the regional distribution, if we're to consider the regional distribution, we can see in Shirak Mars, out of the total 7,000, we have approximately equal number and equal distribution between Lori and Shirak. And 78% of the domics, or the majority of them, are distributed among urban settlements, and the main volumes are concentrated in Shirak, Gyumri, Vanadzor, and Spitak towns. I keep losing the slides. Now, if we look at it, 2,837 are in Gyumri out of 7,000, and then we have Spitak, and then we have Vanadzor, and you can see the numbers, 1,322 and 653 respectively. And if we consider the distribution according to the land ownership, then we can see that 62% are located or state or community property lands, and only 38% are located on citizens' own lands. By the way, I would like to stress that this is, for example, taken from Vanadzor, and here we see the distribution of the wagons, or domics, and you can see that in Vanadzor we have this more domic neighborhood format is more popular. That is to say, the domics have sprung up in the form of small communities or neighborhoods, and this is very typical of Vanadzor and Gyumri and Spitak, whereas here you can see that the wagons that are the dark dots are really spread out across the neighborhoods and the districts wherever they found an empty plot. It should be noted that in 2019, according to the decision made by the Prime Minister of Armenia, of course, with jointly and with the support of the Ministry of Territorial Administration and Infrastructure, as well as local communities and local NGOs, these domics were mapped, and we have some cartographic evidence and data as to where they're located, and also we have data about the households living there, about the conditions and the states of the domics, and this information that was collected gives us a general understanding of the situation and the scope and the severity of the problems on the ground. Previously, when we were listening to the presentation about the action plan, we could see that generally speaking, in our DOMIC districts, the problems that we faced during the pandemic revealed a lot of similarity with and are even identical to the issues shared among different countries and places in the region specifically. Now, the wagons that are mostly made of metal or wood are very small, from 20 to 30 square meters, and here we have mostly socially vulnerable households, and unfortunately here we have quite a high specific weight of people who became disabled because of the earthquake, because you know that according to standards, disabled people also need extra and additional area for their residence. And also here we have a very dense population in the wagon areas, and obviously, during the pandemic, in such conditions, it is impossible to maintain large physical distance. And if we have a person who's infected, there is complete impossibility of safe isolation. Besides, accessibility of infrastructure, sanitary and hygiene conditions are really terrible, and already the lack of water is already ruling out the possibility of prevention, for example, by means of washing hands. And you can see how the situation exactly from the wagons, and you will see how much they need water. So this is one of the cases where we inside the DOMIC, we can see the situation. This is a photo from inside the DOMIC, and you can have a proper understanding of the sanitary conditions in the DOMICs. Unfortunately, the vast majority look like this and are in such conditions. And the other example of the DOMIC, I do not know whether you can see this or not, but on the wall here, we have plastic bottles filled with water, and the residents are using the sun energy, the solar energy, to heat these waters in the bottle in order to use it for sanitary purposes. That is to say, for sanitation. This is how the residents solve their problems. And in the winter months, especially in Tirana region, where we have very severe winters, we do not have proper heating possibilities in the DOMICs. And either natural gas or electricity are not available at all, or we do not have the ability or the funding. People do not have funds or money in order to pay the bills for electricity and gas. That is to say, I showed to you this bottled water, and this is how people are trying to heat water to wash themselves. So that is the reason why, because of the pandemic in Armenia, we had either partial lockdowns or we completely stopped the operation of industrial sectors, and also people living in the wagon houses or neighborhoods and districts were mainly involved in the services sector, and the services sector was down during the pandemic period. These people lost their livelihoods for quite a long period of time. And of course, in Gyumri, we had specific address referral and also numbering. In Gyumri, they have specific addresses, and the people living there have their own passports. They're registered in the population register, and they're registered in the addresses of the wagon cabins. And based on this registration, since the circumstance of living in the DOMIC is largely raising the coefficient of the social vulnerability. If you're enrolled in the social vulnerability system, then the people are able to benefit from different social assistance programs and benefits. Now, speaking about the accessibility of different services provided by the state during the pandemic, I would like to stress that the vaccination in Armenia is completely free of charge as a prevention measure, regardless of the social status of the family. By the way, it is free of charge also for the foreign citizens in Armenia. And by the way, apart from the inpatient opportunity, we have also mobile vaccination points that try to ensure vaccination more available and easily accessible for different groups of the population. Also, from among the services provided by the state, I highly prioritize, and I would like especially to highlight the experience that we have, because I see that in Kyrgyzstan they have it too. The treatment of the citizens who have COVID, their care, healthcare treatment, and food provision is complete. If they are hospitalized, it's completely free of charge. And normally, in this sense, the citizens do not have any problems. So apart from the highly listed measures, we have other measures too. During the pandemic, we have them implemented, and up to now, we are implementing some measures. So we have 25 specific measures and actions that are aimed at the neutralization of the economic and social implications and consequences of COVID. So apart from triggering specific economic sectors, we have considered children with families with children as target groups, as well as incapacitated citizens, unemployed citizens, socially vulnerable families, those who cannot pay their tuition fees, those who have lost their jobs or have become temporarily unemployed because of the COVID, as well as there was a compensation measure for the utility bills. If we are to wrap up, I would like to mention that during the pandemic, our government has undertaken major efforts in order to neutralize and to recover the implications of COVID, as well as to recover specifically focusing on the provision on providing higher accessibility of services. However, I would like to say that we would like to see more enhanced effectiveness of measures and their implication in relation to this targeted group of DOMICS residents, given the scarcity and the insufficiency of the infrastructure and the different measures in the DOMIC neighbors. I would like to take note that this year we have the 2022-2026 action plan of the Republic of Armenia government, and here we already have a specific objective in order to regulate the issue that I already mentioned. Specifically here we're speaking about the resettlement of the households living in wagons or DOMICs, the destruction of these DOMICs, and the improvement of the urban development in these areas. So it is envisaged that by 2023, the government will have ensured all the legislative basis and grounds for defining the approaches and the priorities for these families. And accordingly, they will ensure the adoption of the respective decrees. And starting from 2023, the government will assume the implementation of the specific projects in the logic of the priorities and the approaches defined by the government. The project will, of course, tend, apart from the solution of these issues, to ensure the UN Geneva Charter defined decent, appropriate, and sanitary housing affordability and accessibility, as well as the implementation of SDG 11. By the way, in order to solve these problems, we are discussing at the moment, based on the statuses of these families, which are diverse, of course, to demonstrate a tailored and diversified approach, so that in the future we have specific options and scenarios. And here we're considering the formation of a social housing fund, different formats of assistance provision, and also provision of some land plots to different households, beneficial interest loans. And previously, if they had wagons in a specific land plot and they have built stone structures around them, we're proposing also the legalization of the structures if they comply with urban development norms and construction norms, and they do not have any violations, or they are not subject to any other legal limitations. So this was the main information that I wanted to share with you. And if you have any questions, I will gladly take them. And we have great expectations also from the action plan, and also we're looking forward to our very fruitful future cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this other very meaningful, very rich and very inspiring experience from Armenia, which once again brings about the multidimensionality of the challenges that we are facing, and also presents once again with some concrete measurement and steps that have been courageously taken to address some of these challenges. Apologies, there is an open microphone and I hear an echo.
Yeah, she's turning it off now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this very interesting workshop has run a little over time. So we have only about 5 minutes for the questions and answers. And since I don't see questions from the audience, I would like to put in communication the local experiences and our lead authors by asking our lead authors, starting with Stephen, perhaps, with a quick comment of how they see the concrete experiences we have just heard about communicate with the Recovery Action Plan and its objectives and frameworks. We start with Steve and then Chrissy and then Rick.
Good morning, everyone. It is actually morning here. Regarding the Kyrgyz Republic, a very broad-based set of issues revolving around your informal settlements. One thing that jumped out at me was, in this instance, I think the COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan has a lot of guidance that could be very helpful in building resilience, both to against COVID, as well as achieving sustainable development goals and boosting your economic performance, as well as building your infrastructure. I think what jumped out at me was that the issues faced in the Kyrgyz Republic seem to be very across almost all of the policy areas. So I would for that one, I would look pretty heavily at the Recovery Action Plan, and hopefully we'll get to write some more about implementation. Look at the lectures as well. I'm hoping that can help you quite a bit. So regarding Armenia, I just wanted to focus on something you were talking about at the end, and you were talking about informal settlement evictions, and you were talking about destruction of the property and resettlement, and suggesting that there was some legalization for some of the better structures, but I think you were implying that most not. Just what jumped out at me was, if you walk down that path, if you look at the guidelines for formalization, you will see that we generally, when you analyze the problem, it's often that's often a very kind of dangerous way to go, because when you destroy their informal settlements, often they'll just go build them somewhere else, and you went through all the cost of destroying them and fixing that problem, and it just moved. So be careful with that, I guess. Look at the guidelines. Look, there's a section in there that talks about this. Christy can probably hit on that as well. So just be very careful along that path. There are unexpected problems can arise, and you should be careful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Chrissy, the floor is yours.
Yes, I've been in Bishkek and I know very well the situation, and I have worked a little bit with Malcolm Childers there, so I know very well what you are talking about. And I just want to say in general for all participants that in order to help you a little bit more in detail, we need to know exactly the specific needs, and to prioritize also our own actions because we can provide more in-depth information on several topics, on how to raise awareness among the professionals, how to raise awareness among the academia, the universities, so how to develop the local experts, and in several other topics, how also to help you how to try to increase the density, the urban density safely, and to develop tools so that you will manage to host more people properly in the cities, and avoid the extent of the urban sprawl and the extent of informal settlements. But we need to know. The other thing that I want to say very fast is that we are not now in the post-pandemic recovery issue. We have to manage the pandemic now. So we have to focus also on the urgent issues, how to manage the pandemic, that these are also in the recovery action plan. And we can help you also there from our own experience, from our own countries, because we all face similar problems. And we need to prioritize that, because if you leave it as such, and if you cannot stop the pandemic there in the informal settlements, in the most vulnerable people, then we are never going to end with the pandemic. It will continue forever, and people are fed up, and then they don't want to follow the measures. So maybe we give a priority to give you some instructions how to implement the urgent issues for the pandemic at the beginning, and of course in parallel to continue your ongoing projects. This is very good. That's what I said, that you prioritize. You develop the pandemic risk reduction plan according to the vulnerability in the various informal settlements, and according to the progress that you have made in providing sanitation, water, whatever. But you have to focus on the pandemic, how to finish with the pandemic. This is very important. This is the uppermost priority. And also the citizenship is important, because if people lack of documents, then you cannot do anything. You cannot even give them for free the vaccines or whatever, or the health care. This is what I had to say. I'm not sure whether I helped you, but the time is limited. But I'm available anytime you want to contact.
Thank you, Professor Poțiu. Indeed, you raised a very provocative but central point about the COVID-19 pandemic is a tragedy and also an opportunity for change, and it should be prioritized for all the other benefits of transformation, of improvement to follow. I would give the floor for one last comment from Mr. Wouters.
Okay, thank you, Matteo. Well, I think both very interesting presentations. And why? Because we see that the problems are treated in a multidisciplinary way. And I think that is very important. So talking about policy areas 1 to 9, I think at least 5 or 6 are covered. The good thing in both countries is that the cadastral registry and cadastre, the map, are quite well okay. I know from my own experience that both in Armenia and Kyrgyzstan, a lot of work has been invested in setting up a good cadastre. And so I would also say then make use of that. So by registering all the settlements already in the official cadastres, after, of course, making a decision whether a dwelling can be there or that it shall be removed, of course. But I think it would be a good parallel action to already start with that, because that is the basis for further formalization and upgrading of these settlements later on. I think for that, I would leave it for now, also because of the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Wouters. It's been my great honor and pleasure to be moderating this very interesting, very rich workshop today. I will now give the floor to my colleague Alexandra Ejazi for a wrap-up. But before that, allow me to thank all the presenters, both our lead authors and the local experts, for enriching our knowledge and our understanding of this very, very urgent and multidimensional challenge. Thank you very much, and I look forward to interacting with you all in the future as we build this knowledge base and this solution space for this grave challenge. Thank you so much. Alexander, this floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Matteo. And indeed, this was a very rich session, rich through the diversity of the cases, but also through the entry points to what we came across this morning's and this afternoon's discussion on the cross-cutting themes, on the multi-sectoral interventions. The goal of this session was to raise awareness about the COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan for informal settlements, but we managed to have a greater view of how the Recovery Action Plan can enable, empower local authorities to accelerate, to move ahead, and to encompass as much as possible the different domains that we discussed. I noted down through our experts' presentations the importance of achieving success within the Recovery Action Plan that can help us build resilience in the cities and within the regions of inquiry to COVID-19, but also support growth of the economies and build resilience to a broad range of future challenges. It will also enable those who will implement achieving success through the building resilience to COVID and growth at the larger national side. Through Chrissy's presentation, I noted the importance of prioritizing and not trying to address all the challenges at once and in one single time. Title provision and registration is very vital for recovery from COVID-19 and again, building up resilience, and also involving local experts from the beginning, raising awareness among local experts about the work that has been done, including the UNECE work. We need also to continue these exchanges with local experts, and maybe this would be also a very important segue towards the material that Matteo was mentioning that is going to be on the platform. And also using the experience of 2 years of the pandemic. Based on Rick's intervention, I really want to point out and highlight the importance of tenure security for people's well-being, economic development and formalization, as well as the real estate market. It is an important asset, and this is where setting up a good land administration is essential for tenure security, and it does pay off within the time frame of urban development. I also noted down that the very practical interventions that have been implemented in the city of Bishkek and how it helps building resilience against COVID, but also moving ahead with the Recovery Action Plan, as well as the presentation of Ms. Arzumanian from Armenia, that really exemplified the importance of the challenge, which is multidimensionally challenges, and the concrete interventions to develop to formalize some of these informal settlements. In a nutshell, this was a tremendous opportunity for all of us to get a better sense of the challenges ahead, but also the Recovery Action Plan's capacity to strengthen some of the engaged strategies and accelerating those towards resilience building. Thank you very much indeed for everyone, the UNECE, for enabling this session, as well as the experts, and very much so our local experts. Thank you all. Matteo, if there is any word that you would want to add that I forgot, please jump in.
No, I think you covered pretty much all the bases, and then we just remind the audiences that they will receive indications about the online platform and the courses, the lecture series that Stephen also referenced in the next few weeks. Thank you all so much, and have a nice evening and weekend.
Thank you.
I will also want to congratulate the local people there and wish them all the best and good strength, and keep on. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. hope we can help. Let us know.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.